And there were bands like Bikini Kill is probably the most famous, and they wrote this they kind of coined the term riot girl in a way. But basically they put on these nights where they brought the women to the front, like, because women tend to be like standing at the back of the gig, holding the guys' coats whilst they all like beat each other up at the front. So this was this kind of idea of reversing that. I mean, they went to another level that I wouldn't in this decade use, in like charging men more to get in and stuff like that. And I feel like now Atta Girl is very much like 50-50, the gender roles that turn up, the genders that turn up, and roles. Yeah, so we're not about man hate, and I really hate the fact that I even have to say that. Like, in being a feminist, you have to justify that you don't hate men, and like, I don't want to have to say that, but I feel like sometimes you have to say that. It's basically just recognizing the imbalance in the music industry and how it's still carrying on. I'm not really... Well, so we've been at Island Bar for a few years now, and we kind of feel like that format's tired itself out a bit. I think, yeah, the other thing I should talk about as well is that out of Atta Girl, I ended up getting a job working for Island Bar in Victoria as their events manager and marketing manager for a while. And so I got to see kind of the back end of people booking for small venues, if you want to know about that. But yeah, I feel like from doing the bookings at those events and from doing my own event, you have to change things around now and then because people get bored. We get bored, and if you're bored, that's no good. So we're going to move to Hare and Hounds, and the first night we're doing it is in June again, because basically lots of us are studying and have been really busy. So it's been a little bit of a break. And we're joining forces with another night that puts on bands more regularly. So we've got this band called Ghost Mice from America coming to play, who I really love. So they're going to, yeah. And then also, for a long time, we've had, at the beginning of the night, it kind of started informally. I'd just be chatting to people who came to the night regularly, which is how I met Sarah. And through talking to women mostly as well, it's just like women were too scared to learn to DJ. They were just, I'd hear things like, oh, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. Oh, I'd love to do that, but how do I do it? And so we started doing this thing where at the beginning of the night, I'd invite like people, a few women at a time to come along, and I'd teach them how to use the decks, because it's actually not that hard. Like, I found I talked to like male DJs back when I lived in Nottingham, and they made it sound like this incredibly complicated thing that I wouldn't possibly understand. And when I came to Birmingham, luckily this wonderful guy called Dunk, who ran an indie pop night called the Autumn Store, he let me put on my first ever Atta Girl, just like at the end of one of his nights, and he taught me how to DJ in a very simple way, and it just wasn't very hard. So well, what's the big fuss? So now we teach women at the beginning how to DJ, and then if they come along more regularly, sometimes they end up joining Atta Girl, and all the women involved now, part of the collective, they started off that way, just like turning up a lot, enjoying the music and DJing. So that, yeah, we've played at like festivals, and we also DJ'd for the Slits when they were in Birmingham. Rest in peace.
The reason our company started is because Soesen moved into my house because there was a rusty washing machine in the garden and she liked it, and she only had one day to find a house to live in because she started working for Sampad at the Mac, and I live in Borsall Heath, and she moved in and we didn't know each other and we started talking, and as with all the best businesses, Professional Incredibles came out of love because we love music, and we started DJing together on radio when there was Rhubarb Radio at the Custard Factory.
And because we love cake.
And because we really love cake. And we'd find, because, I don't know, I guess because my brother is a fine artist, he's a photographer, and I've always kind of been brought up around people who are creative in some sense, and I think that you had a lot of creative people around you in your life. We were really used to being around people who were incredibly talented, but but didn't want to have to sell the fact that they were talented because they didn't see it like that. And we so often found that we were like making one person, like someone would tell us about what they're doing, and we'd be like, oh, you need to meet this person, and you need to come round for tea and cake, and then you'll meet each other, and then they'd meet each other and a thing had happened. And we're like, no way, cake. So we were going to call our company Cake because we made cake and because we love cake. Sounds like a bit of an obsession. It is an obsession. I love cake. But we decided not to go with cake, did we? We decided to call it pie instead. Professional Incredibles. And the reason that we chose that name is because there were two things, kind of abiding gripes in the music industry, I think. One was mediocrity. So you go to a gig, the sound's pretty poor. The promoter doesn't treat the band well. The band act like divas. It's not promoted properly. And professionalism, a lack of professionalism, the same thing. So we wanted to kind of, from the outset, be like, okay, this is what we're trying to be. So we're trying to be professional. We work with incredible people. And it
that would be a professional, incredible. You could be a professional, incredible cook, or a professional, incredible gardener, or professional, incredible musician. But mostly, what we work with is musicians and artists. So it was about developing their practice and making them incredibly professional and professionally incredible.
Our major project is Espirito Brum. It's the UK edition of Espirito Mundo, which is a cultural exchange, in this case between Brazil and the UK. We're going to be doing our third year in Birmingham this year. It's going to be based in Kings Heath. And what happens is that we kind of, when we found out that we could do this thing, we took the idea that it was a cultural exchange, like really literally. So can you explain a bit about it?
A load of Brazilian artists come over to England. We house them with our friends that are musicians or the youth hostel, so they have a very real experience here. We then put them on in warehouses. They perform a number of events over a week generally, and they do a proper exchange with other musicians, Brummie artists. And then we take a load of Brummies over to Brazil to perform there. So it's an exchange on every level between sound technicians, between musicians, between artists, between production managers. One of the biggest things that the Brazilian production company said the first time they came over, they just couldn't get over the way we produced it. They loved it, and they couldn't actually pinpoint how we did things differently, but we saw very clearly how differently they did things when we went over there and worked on Brazilian time, which was very frustrating. It's an exchange. We take a load of wicked musicians and artists from here, take them over there, and then swap over.
I think I've never felt... I've felt challenged being in the music industry as a woman, but I've almost felt that makes me stronger because of people's expectations of me, that I'm at liberty to invert, you know? So I've ended up, you know, when I first started my company, I started a company called Magpie Brown. It was public image consultancy, so I'd work alongside an artist to help them work out how they wanted to be put out into the world. So it would be like building websites, writing their copy for them, talking to promoters, stuff like that. And I remember once, something that did actually really make me cry, and it was because I'm a woman. I was working for an artist called Jo Hamilton, who's an amazing female artist. You know, Jo Hamilton, out of a studio in Moseley. And I was called down to London to have a meeting with some lawyers. And a guy there was like, oh, you're really interesting. Yeah, it would be great if we could work together. Do you want to come down to a meeting that I've got, like, next week? And I was so excited. I thought, oh, this is going to be really good. And I got there, and the meeting was on the 12th floor of a hotel in Regent Street, which is where music journalists kind of meet up, because it's near the BBC, in this kind of bar. And after sitting there for an hour with this guy having meetings and then people going again and stuff, I realised that the reason he'd invited me is because I'm a young woman, and he wanted to have a young woman sitting with him while he had meetings with men because it made him look better. And I left, and I was a bit drunk as well because he'd been giving me wine and stuff. He wasn't being a sleazebag, but he was very much like, the conversation kept mentioning that there was a woman sat on the sofa with them and everything. And I remember leaving and thinking, right, that's never going to happen to me again. And it never has. Yeah.
I started DJing about 15 years ago, and then I started putting on hip-hop nights when I was about 18. And I didn't notice until they'd been running for a few years. It was when I invited another female DJ in who had been working in the music industry for years, knew loads about music. She was a wicked DJ, and she really had to prove herself to the other DJs that were behind that booth. And it wasn't until that point that I realised I was just having to work a little bit harder. I just didn't really notice it before. But that didn't really bother me. I just carried on. I stopped doing hip-hop nights because it was so male-dominated and it was getting a bit boring. So the night changed to much more eclectic stuff, lots of electronic music, lots of jungle, dub, reggae, and music that I like, basically. And then I started a festival with 4 other guys. Again, I was the only female, which in itself was a very interesting experience, and our relationships became very deep from running a festival. You're living in each other's pockets, and we ran that for about 6-7 years in total.
If it's something that you're starting out of Birmingham, one of the problems that you might have in the initial phases is just getting people from the city, the powers that be, whoever it is that you're trying to, the civic interest, to understand that there are people that aren't from the UK that want to come to your city and speak with people and create music with people from here. That is a very big barrier in Birmingham City Council culture. It's something that's endemic, and it's almost like, like I was saying about being a woman in the music industry, and I kind of play dumb about that. I just go into a meeting, whoever it might be with, I don't care how chauvinist they're about to be with me, and I will just talk business with the council or with whoever else you need to convince. You just have to be exactly the same. And the one great thing about Birmingham is that the only people that I've ever met outside of the UK that really know about Birmingham are musicians. Birmingham is synonymous with so many incredible musicians from across the board, from CBSO to Black Sabbath, Duran Duran, UB40, Steel Pulse, Judas Priest, the list goes on and on and on. And if you know that and you've got a confidence about it and you're answering the questions that they need to be answered and the boxes that they need to be ticked without compromising your project and talking to those needs, then you're going to be fine,
The difficulty we had was convincing the council that it was a really good thing to take UK artists outside internationally. Their thought is, why would you want to do that? Who would want to listen to our music? But they'll fund international artists to come here because ultimately they're better for some reason. So that was a big obstacle.
Yeah.
I think a lot of creative people aren't making a distinction between business and capitalism. That's been my feeling over the years, where it's all right to earn a living from what you do. It doesn't make you a capitalist. And, running your art form as a business, if you want to do it that way, is a good thing. And it doesn't mean you have to abuse other people through it either. I think you can do it very ethically.
I'd say a really good way to develop as any artist is to find another artist and work with them. And if that means that you're going to spend some time recording an EP or working on a live show together and you're not getting paid for that to happen, at the end of the day, once it's ready and it's slick and you're both ready to go with it and you're sharing your networks, when it gets out there, you are the people that are going to be reaping the reward from that. That's what I'd say.